Hi. Hello. Okay, there we go. Um, so I took a break for a few days from recording this because I've been recording like a bad lad. I'm gonna try to keep it to 1 to 2 videos. Maybe. Maybe. I don't know. This one it seems really short, so I may be tempted to do 4 again, but I know I shouldn't. So I'm gonna just try to do 1 today. Mainly because, if I keep doing so many, it's probably gonna be bad. So for the next few days, I'm gonna do 1 to 2. Hopefully. I don't know. We'll see. That or I'll do 4 on one day and call it good. But today I'm doing 1. Anyway, enough of me fucking rambling This is chapter 18 of Black Cats Are Bad Luck and So Are You, Kid by Holly. Azuku woke up to something jumping on the bed. Not big enough to be one of his teachers, but too big to be Sushi. He opened his eyes just in time to see Eri crawling up to him and laying her head beside him on Ozawa's pillow. She giggled quietly and reached out to pet him, and he gently huffed and began to purr for the girl. The sun wasn't up yet, and when Zuko shifted to look at the clock, it read 6 a.m. He sighed and laid his head back down, letting Aries scoot closer and curl up next to him more. He felt his teacher begin to stir beside him. The raven-haired man groaned softly and opened his eyes, looking over. He saw Aerie and smiled softly, reaching over and gently rubbed her arm, and whispered to her, Aerie, what are you doing up? She shrugged and whispered back to him, still petting Zuko. I woke up and it was scary. He hummed and nodded, reaching over and pulling the girl closer. Okay then, kiddo. She smiled and yawned, curling into the man. Zuko was squished between their heads, but not uncomfortably. He let himself close his eyes again and relaxed. He felt Aerie slowly stop petting his fur, and her hand relaxed as she fell back asleep. And he listened to his teacher's breathing until he had fallen asleep, before he closed his eyes and went to sleep. Hasashi woke up with a new weight by his side, and he grumbled and opened his eyes. Sushi was laying on his chest as normal, and he looked over and felt himself melt at the sight. Eri was curled up right beside Shota, with the small black hat and the raven-haired man's head. The man was drooling slightly onto his pillow. Hasashi watched them all rest for a moment, before sneaking a quick picture and carefully sliding out of bed. He gently set Sushi outside the room and carefully shut the door. The cat walked away with his tail raised high, and Hasashi chuckled softly at the small beast's sass. He walked into the kitchen and began to prepare a simple breakfast for the inhabitants of his and his husband's shared apartment. He turned on some soft music and hummed along with it as he cooked, dancing and working into the rhythm of the music. He kept going until he felt a pair of large, cold hands slide under his shirt and around his middle, and someone pressed up to his back. He jumped a little at the cold hands and looked back to see his husband with incredulous glare. Sashi whispered to the man, What the heck, man? Your hands are cold! The man behind him simply hummed and let his hands crawl higher, pressed himself into the blonde more, and the man in front of him sighed. Sashi knew the man wasn't moving, especially as he rested his forehead on the man's back. Sashi sighed and kept working as best as he could. If one of those kids wakes up, you're gonna traumatize the poor boy even more so. The man chuckled, and Hazashi could feel it more than hear it. Man hugged him tighter. He'll live. I want my husband. Sashi sighed and set his cooking to the side, turning around in the raven-haired man's hold. He looked down at the other two, looked right back up at him with an innocent and happy smile. Sashi melted and hugged the man back. Your class? You teach them too. Yeah, but you're around them more. The man chuckled again before leaning up to kiss the blonde, who happily reciprocated. They stood for a moment just like that, before the other broke the kiss and set their foreheads together gently, holding him close. The blonde sighed and smiled, closing his eyes and holding the other man back. It was lovely and peaceful, until Ari woke up. What are you two doing? His husband sighed and chuckled, and let go of the other and turned to walk to Ari to pick the young girl up. Zuko was in her arms, his body long and limp, as she held onto the small kitten by hugging him with her arms under his front legs. His husband leaned down and lifted the child up, holding her close. Nothing, sweetie. Want to let Midoriya go and have breakfast? Eri nodded and let the man gently take the small black beast from her and set him on the counter, where he flopped down onto the cold marble. Eri giggled at him, and she was set in her seat. Zashi watched his husband with pure adoration. He turned back around and began to prep their food and serve it. Eri began to dig in, and his husband happily waited for the other to feed the cats and sit down before beginning to eat himself. He told the other not to share his food, but he knew the man was sneaking food to them. What surprised him was Izuku hopping down and begging for some of Shota's food. Sashi knew his husband thought that the blonde was oblivious to the other spoiling, but he was not. After all, Sushi was not that fat just from his kibble and wet food. So he just chuckled to himself and went back to his meal, pretending to be none the wiser. Shota sat on the floor beside Eri, looking down at the simple math she was trying to figure out. He was very patient with her, and she learned quickly. He had Midori on his leg, who was there watching them both work quietly. Currently, Eri was stuck on a multiplication problem, and she couldn't get past it. Zawa leaned forward and was trying to explain, but it wasn't helping. Eri slowly got more and more frustrated and began to cry a little, though Izuku jumped on her lap and made them both pause. Zawa watched him point to the multiplication problem she had just finished and tapped it. She watched him carefully, and as did Zawa. The young boy tapped the problem 7 times and looked up at Eri, who tilted her head at him. Izuku jumped on the table and tapped the problem again, where he wrote the answer. Drew a sort of plus sign, and tapped the problem twice. And Zawa understood what he was trying to say. He's telling you to add 7 to this, because multiplying is the same thing as adding 7 this many times. Ari's face lit up in understanding, and she hurriedly wrote the answer. She looked up back at Zawa with big eyes, now filled with tears of happiness, and hugged the man. He chuckled and patted her back gently, half hugging her back while not putting any pressure onto her or trapping her. She let go of him after a moment and picked up Izuku again, who went limp in her hold and let her twirl him around. Azawa watched them with fondness and sympathy for the small boy who was being manhandled. Cat-handled? Either way, Eri sat him back down after a moment where he stood swaying for a while until he regained his balance, and Eri sat back down to continue working on her work. He smiled and leaned forward to keep helping her, and the small weight it back on his leg. He reached down to pet the small beast while he helped the small girl beside him, unaware of the blonde watching him fondly behind. Eri didn't want to sleep in her bed that night. She begged the raven-haired teacher to let her sleep with them, as she had that morning. Zuko helped her because by looking up at the man with the best puppy eyes, the blonde man was laughing softly at the man's dilemma behind him, also lightly teasing the man and helping to beg. The man finally relented and picked the girl up, helping her get ready for bed before setting her in the teacher's shared bed. She giggled and crawled up to the raven-haired man's pillow, and Zawa set Zuko where he normally slept, though carefully not to at him on the small girl invading his space. Eri hugged Zuko and pulled him off the pillow, though, much to his dismay, his teacher chuckled and crawled into bed beside the two, Eri curling up next to him immediately. The man yawned and laid down. Eri began to get comfortable and fall asleep, though before she could, his English teacher walked in, finished his nighttime routine, and playfully pouted as he saw the trio. Getting comfy without me? The blonde set Sushi on the bed and curled up next to them all. Throwing his arm around Eri and his homeroom teacher, Izuku could feel the man's content hum, where his back was pressed against the man's chest. He wiggled a bit, trying to get comfortable before his teacher moved him a bit and helped them. He sighed and laid back down, Eri holding on to him, reminiscent of how one would hold a teddy bear. It was warm, safe, and soon Izuku saw Sushi curl up under Eri's legs between the two men. Not long after that, the little girl holding him fell asleep, quickly followed by the two men surrounding her, and the small cat between them. Sorry, I'm giggling at the notes. Oh yeah, don't worry. Fluff never lasts too long in the hurt/comfort Mwah! That's the note. Yeah, I think I'm gonna record only one today. I was going to do probably a second, but honestly, I've been blitzing through this fic, and there's only 10 chapters left, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there's only 10 chapters left. I know it says 29, but the last chapter is just a stance thing, so, no need to read that. I'll probably just put like a little note about it at the end of chapter 28. Anyway, hope y'all have a nice day. Bye!